George Orwell once said that war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continuous. With the United States military finally leaving Afghanistan, in which is the longest war in American history, the conservatives are basically calling it a huge mistake. That we should have, at the very least, kept part of Afghanistan and not have the Taliban control the capital, Kabul, or the Air Force bases like Bagram. And we have some people on the moderate left who are agreeing with this principle. Now, the people who have been more vocal, almost supportive of Biden, have been the libertarian establishment, who are, of course, the biggest proponents against war. But Afghanistan is not easily defined. If we are to look at the Taliban itself, do they represent an existential threat to the United States and to the United States allies and their interest in the region? I would say that is something that will have to wait and be seen. Taliban is not like Al Qaeda. They are not an international terrorist organization. They are of the Hanafi school of thought. They're not a Wahhabi ideology, even though that they are of the strict interpretation of Sharia law, something that we as Westerners may find abhorrent. But I think there's something much more nefarious at foot here. And this just may be my pessimism kicking in, because I am a pessimist and I'm always thinking the worst. But let's try and make sense of what is happening, because I'm not going to firmly believe that Biden is looking out for the United States' best interest. Remember, this is a man who is one of the primary architects of the Patriot Act, the mass incarceration of African Americans when he was a senator, and so I am not going to suddenly, and also a supporter of the Syrian war intervention, military intervention in Syria. Yeah, I am not going to put my hopes on a warmonger and a liar, as most. In fact, every single president of the last 125 years is a liar. But let me try and make sense of the situation of what is happening. And what I'm going to do is read you from news articles, both from the left and right, and try and give you a sense of what I think is going to happen. Now, this may not happen, but I'm just not going to believe that the United States said, we are going to stop. My theory is this, is that I believe that the United States will return to Afghanistan. Maybe not immediately, but what they need is an instigating event of sorts. I hate to use the term false flag. A manufactured event, in that with the rush of the US military out of the country, they left some military weaponry behind. It may not have been tanks and missiles, but enough weapons to get in the hands of an already lightly armed militia, which is the Taliban. The Taliban wish to only govern Afghanistan. They have no wish to expand upon these borders. And that's in their charter, that's in their beliefs, the past, since 1994, with the implementation of the group, that their only wish was to govern Afghanistan through the Quran and the Sunnah, a strict interpretation of Sharia law. And so almost as soon as the pullout of the United States, on Monday, Representative Mike Waltz, under the heading of the CNBC, under the heading Mike Waltz on Afghanistan, we are going to see Al Qaeda 3.0. As you could see already with the pullout of the United States from Afghanistan, they're already trying to play the threat that they played back in 2001, a repeat of history, if you will, hoping that most of America has a short attention span. And I'll read you from the article, quote, from the article, Representative Mike Waltz slammed President Joe Biden's defense of his decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan and warned that Al Qaeda would make a resurgence during a Monday evening interview on CNBC's The News with Shepard Smith, in which Waltz said, quote, I think at the end of the day, you have two choices in Afghanistan. You have a small presence focused on counterterrorism and supporting the Afghan military, or you face what we're facing now, which will be a cesspool of terrorism, end quote. He also would go on to say that the problem is terrorism that happens in Afghanistan doesn't stay in Afghanistan. We will see Al Qaeda 3.0. They are working closely with the Taliban, and they do intend to attack America again. Retired Lieutenant General Douglas Lute served in both the George W. Bush and Obama administrations, focusing on Afghanistan, and said that Al Qaeda terror networks were, in fact, destroyed while on The News with Shepard Smith, in which he said, quote, it was 10 years ago that we brought bin Laden to justice and that Al Qaeda, by the way, no, we assassinated him. The original cause of our being in Afghanistan, the network of Al Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan has been decimated over our time there. So those vital U.S. national interests have certainly been served, end quote. And he would be right, Lieutenant Douglas Lute. He's absolutely correct, because I'm going to quote from you the United Nations Security Council dated letter of July 23rd, 2020, in which they talk about the threat of terrorism in the region of the Arabian Peninsula, Asia, and Europe. And on page 15, it states that according to member states, Al Qaeda is covertly active in 12 Afghan provinces, and Ayman al-Zawahiri remains based in the country. Now, as of late, it is suspected that he is dead or that he is completely not active, because we have not heard anything about his existence in quite some time. I'll continue. The monitoring team estimates that the total number of Al Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan is between 400 and 600 fighters. The leadership maintains close contact with the Haqqani network in February 2020, and al-Zawahiri met with Yahya Haqqani, the primary Haqqani network contact with Al Qaeda since mid-2009, to discuss ongoing cooperation. Al Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent operates under the Taliban umbrella from Nimruz, Helmand, and Kandahar provinces. The group repeatedly has between 100 and 150 and 200 members from Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, and Pakistan. The current leader of Al Qaeda IS is Osama Mahmoud, who succeeded the late Asim Umar. AQIS, Al Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, is reportedly planning retaliation operations in the region to avenge the death of its former leader. Now, what is that saying is that there are at best, 600 fighters, tops, left within Afghanistan and Pakistan, total. Is that enough to pose a threat to U.S. interests, let alone Pakistan or India or even Israel? I'd say no. Because you figure in before September 11, 2001, there was approximately 1,000 fighters from Al Qaeda, maybe 1,500 at best. And yes, they got through and they hijacked planes and but our security is a little bit better than it is now. We're more aware. And there have been no attacks from Al Qaeda in the United States in over 10 years. And we've had failed attacks by the Islamic State, especially here in New York. We have one guy who actually tried to hide a pot bomb in a subway, and the only thing the bomb wasn't strong enough, and he blew himself up. And we've had numerous instances where vehicles are used to run down people. But other than that, there has not been a great international bombing campaign like we saw in the mid-90s with the 1998 East Africa bombings, or with the Kozar bombing towers attacks, or like failed plots like Bajinka, or the Millennium Plot, or the Landmarks Plot. We have not seen any type of large-scale international terrorist plot against U.S. interests. So I would say to you that Al Qaeda poses no threat right now. Now, with the emergence of the Taliban, will that give a more of a recruiting process for people to enter Al Qaeda? I would say yes, there's a good chance that could be possible. We might see an uptick in interest in joining the group. You might see new videos come out by Al Qaeda through the immediate arm As-Sahab. But this all depends on the Taliban itself, right? And the Taliban and Al Qaeda have a very, let's say, I don't want to say a tumultuous relationship. They have different ideologies. One is of course, the Hanbali school of thought, the Hanafi school of thought, which is the Taliban, and Al Qaeda, which is Wahhabi school of thought, the more Saudi ideology. And so Al Qaeda, whether they're under the near enemy or far enemy approach, if you have heard me this before, I'll repeat it again, the near enemy being secular Arab governments in which they wish to overthrow, to take over one by one and create the Islamic Caliphate, the Ummah, or the far enemy, which is the United States and Israel and the coalition partners, in which they don't have the military backing to do that. They just don't. They're pretty much secluded in these areas like Kandahar and Helmand and Nimruz. And so I will read to you an article by Brookings, which is dated May 4th, 2021. U.S. troops are beginning the process of leaving Afghanistan, almost 20 years of fighting, announcing his decision to complete the U.S. withdrawal by September, President Biden declared. But Al Qaeda, which after 9/11 provided the U.S. rationale for invading Afghanistan, still has anywhere between 400 to 600 members fighting with the Taliban, according to UN Security Council estimates. Although Al Qaeda has fighters in Afghanistan, its ability to launch international terrorist attacks from there and from Pakistan, where the core organization has been based for almost 20 years, is limited. Al Qaeda core members haven't successfully attacked the U.S. homeland since 9/11, despite numerous attempts, and have also been ineffective against Europe in the past decade. Affiliate groups such as Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula have conducted limited attacks, including a December 2019 attack that killed 3 people at a U.S. naval base in Florida, but they are not based in Afghanistan and Pakistan like the core. Indeed, in the past decade, Al Qaeda has localized more, relying heavily on affiliates to keep its name alive. And that's coming from Brookings Institute. They also go on to say, U.S. negotiations have pressured the Taliban for years to agree to prevent Al Qaeda from using Afghanistan as a haven for international terrorist attacks. The Taliban claims to have accepted this demand, and Al Qaeda members also claim they will honor this even as they attack the United States from other theaters. However, Taliban leaders have lied about the extent of their relationship with Al Qaeda in the past, casting doubt on denials about the future relationship between the two. And so that's what I was talking about earlier, that could we trust the Taliban to basically uh, control Al Qaeda, or will they use them to engage in a proxy force or a proxy conflict of view with U.S. interests within the region? I don't know. I couldn't tell you right now for certain. I like what the Taliban are saying right off the bat. They're saying that we're going to try our best to not engage in any type of conflict in the United States. They said they want to agree to a more peaceful deal. Now, look, the world stage is watching. It would be suicide for the Taliban to do anything in regards to terrorism on U.S. interests right now, because it would just basically invite the United States, the coalition, to return. And so what I think what they're doing is basically saying all the right things right now, and that maybe in the future, either through their own efforts or from a false flag, say from the CIA or from, say, the Saudi General Intelligence Directorate, or through a number of different espionage agencies, where they can infiltrate these groups, and it's not that hard, and can influence an attack of sorts, in which using weapons that I think were left behind on purpose, so that they can engage in activities in which they could precipitate a return of the U.S. and its coalition partners. CNN, now this is where people need to understand. When it comes to foreign policy, there is no left and right. There is only one party, and that's the war party. And legacy media like CNN, like CBS and MSNBC, who are moderately left, and they're not liberal. I'll just tell you that right now. Don't be tricked into thinking these are liberal agencies. They're not. They have very much in common when it comes to Fox, because look who they have on to talk about foreign policy and the Pentagon, well, the State and War Department. Well, they have former four-star generals, Wade Miley, H.R. McMaster, just former neocon Stephen Miller, just a slew. Even John Bolton was on CNN. John Bolton on CNN. So yeah, I mean, there's only one party when it comes to the Pentagon, the War Department, private military contracting firms, major military corporations like Raytheon, Boeing, LG3 Technologies. They send over their spokespeople to talk on CNN and MSNBC and Fox. Yeah, this is who controls the media. That's just one arm, right? Excuse me. And CNN, this is CNN, by the way, April 30th, 2021. Al Qaeda promises war on all fronts against America as Biden pulls out of Afghanistan. You would think now that CNN would be on the side of Biden in wanting the troops to return home. That isn't the case. I will read you the article. Quote, this weekend marks the 10th anniversary since Osama bin Laden, the mastermind of September 11th attacks in the United States, which he wasn't, that's Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was killed by U.S. Special Operations Forces SEAL Team 6. In an exclusive interview with CNN conducted through intermediaries, 2 Al-Qaeda operatives tell CNN that war against the U.S. will be continuing on all other fronts unless they are expelled from the rest of the Islamic world. In the past, Al-Qaeda has rarely responded to questions, choosing instead to hide behind its own self-serving propaganda, dodging even the most distant scrutiny. It's unclear why the group has chosen to do so. Isn't that convenient, right? Terrorism, and I'll read the rest. Terrorism analyst Paul Cruikshank, editor-in-chief of West Point's CTC Sentinel, who revealed Al-Qaeda's answers, says it is possible that they feel buoyed by the Biden administration's decision to pull out troops from Afghanistan, but they may also be seeking to deflect attention from the many recent losses. End quote. That's CNN pushing the narrative of Al-Qaeda being interested That's in April. That's 4 months prior to the pullout of the military. Asia Times. This is a quote from this is an article from Asia Times, dated November 5th, 2020. And they talk about a different side to Al Qaeda. And the article is entitled "The Truth Behind Al Qaeda's Silence in Afghanistan." Quote, "The key clause in the United States peace deal with Afghanistan's Taliban is a commitment to disallow any militant group from using Afghan soil to plot against America and its allies. But is the Taliban merely pretending that its longtime ally, Al Qaeda, no longer maintains bases and fighters in the areas and controls in Afghanistan? With that commitment, the U.S. has promised a complete withdrawal of its forces from Afghanistan, a departure that some speculate could pave the way for the Taliban's eventual return to power. There are now around 5,000 U.S. troops in the country, a number that will fall to 2,500 by early 2021. And that's correct. Now, the article also says, quote, "The adherence of one-line claim, plain and simple, that Al Qaeda no longer exists in Afghanistan. Opponents of this narrative, however, believe that Al Qaeda's recent silence is an agreed strategy to conceal its presence to facilitate the Taliban's peace deal with the U.S. This could mean Afghanistan is still a willing clandestine hub for Islamist militant groups posing as ever severe threats to regional and global security, but there is no evidence to suggest this." Now, of course, the last article I'll read to you is the article that I'm a little bit worried about, because when the U.S. military left the country, they left so many things behind. This article was written on May 20th, 2021, where it's Military Times, and it's entitled "Taliban May Grab U.S. Military Equipment as American Troops Leave Afghanistan." And this is May. They're already pulling out, but they're already leaving things behind. Quote, "U.S. military equipment could end up in the hands of the Taliban fighters and terrorist groups as American troops withdraw thousands of vehicles, weapons, and other military items from Afghanistan in coming months," Defense Department officials acknowledged on Thursday. That's the Defense Department. That's them saying that. In a rush to get troops out, they're leaving behind small arms fire and weapons and vehicles. The reason for this was that because they wanted to leave something for the Afghan military behind, but there's a good percentage of the Afghan military who are sympathetic to the Taliban, who have joined ranks with them currently, and that's why you didn't see any combat from the Afghan military. And I'll read you the rest of the articles. Quote, "We will be transferring facilities, some vehicles, and other equipment that the Afghan National Defense Forces can utilize in their ongoing efforts to secure the country," end quote, said Brigadier General Matthew Tollinger, Deputy Director of Political Military Affairs for the Joint Chiefs. He also went on to say, "We will be retrograding equipment that we're able to bring back to bases and stations in the continental United States as well as elsewhere. And then we'll be disposing of equipment that essentially is either obsolete, inoperable, or legally not able to transfer to Afghanistan." However, as of recent, there has been information coming out where they have left large carbine rifles, AR-15s, even some Jeeps. I saw at the the Kabul airport, they're leaving behind a lot of these Jeeps and trucks that they had. Who knows what's in those, right? And this goes to my theory, and my worry is this: I could be over exaggerating. And if you're going to leave a comment below, let me know about what you think of my theory, whether it's sound or it's not. My worry is that the continuation of the quote in which I said it to Orwell at the beginning of the video was that war is meant to be continuous. In regards to Afghanistan, my worry is that with the rush for the U.S. military to leave the country, they left behind weapons and military-grade equipment behind in which the Taliban will capture. Will that be used against U.S. forces in the region or against U.S. interests in the region? Or will it fall into the hands of militants who are affiliated with the Taliban, such as the Islamic State in Khorasan, which are currently fighting against the Taliban, or Al Qaeda, Arabian Peninsula? I don't know. I can't tell you right now. It's too early to tell. It's too early to assert things. There's so many wild theories going on right now, and they're all. Most of these are just politically biased. I can't totally dismiss it, but I can't give it any credence. My worry is that the amount of disinformation that will come from the left and right here will be played to the American people, in which they'll be choosing what to believe and what not to believe, but they won't be told the truth. Aeschylus the Greek once said that the first casualty of war is the truth. And do I agree with the pullout? Yes. Do I agree that we should have given more commitment to the Afghan people? Yes. But we don't do nation building. And that came out of the mouth of Antony Blinken, Secretary of State. Mike Pompeo, the former CIA director, actually said that this was the biggest blunder in the Biden administration. Well, he has no room to talk. It's because of the CIA, an agency like that, is the reason why we're seeing the mess in Afghanistan, as well as other parts of the region. And I'll leave the video at that. Right now, the latest news coming out of Afghanistan is basically that the Taliban gave a media talk advising the West that they will adhere to the peace deal by Biden, that they will not engage in military reaction or a reaction from its military arm toward the United States. It actually said that they had forgiven the United States. And I don't know what to say. I mean, there's so much. The people who are suffering the most are the Afghan people. And it's usually the regular citizen who are the victim, not the military industrial complex, not the foreign lobbyists from the Gulf, Israel, not by Pakistan, not by the United States, not by Great Britain and the coalition. Or the militants in Afghanistan. It's the regular people, because that's who are going to be victimized. The people who were working in the Afghan government, in Afghan media, and women in general. It remains to be seen how the Taliban will treat them. Although they promised not to hurt these people. Although I don't believe it. I think they will. You'll hear some stories about executions. I think they're already. I heard some reports about them whipping people and beating some reporters. This is just a quagmire of a mess. But at the same time, how do you not agree to a total military pullout from a country in which we spent 20 years and approximately 1.7 trillion, not billion, trillion dollars in a country that has never been defeated by a foreign power? In 2001, in December of 2001, Osama bin Laden once said that his wish was to not beat the United States in a military exchange, because he knew he couldn't beat the U.S. military, but he can goad them. And by doing so, he wanted to attack the United States and to have an exaggerated response. Now, he tried this with Bill Clinton, and the only person I know that reported on this is Scott Horton, in which bin Laden said that when he did the 1998 East Africa bombings, he thought that President Clinton would react militarily, and he didn't. The only thing Clinton did was send a couple of cruise missiles into Afghanistan. Now, that, of course, was a mistake because the Taliban was visited by Saudi Prince Turki bin Faisal, who tried to negotiate a deal to hand bin Laden over to the United States through Saudi Arabia. And because of Clinton's strikes, the Taliban leader Mullah Omar basically said no. But he wasn't handing over bin Laden anyway. But the Taliban, again, Taliban wasn't very friendly to bin Laden. They didn't like Al Qaeda. They just tolerated them. And of course, according to Pashtunwali tradition, it would be inhospitable or un-Islamic to kick out a fellow Muslim who is being invited into the country. Bin Laden once said that he wanted to goad the United States into a military action where they would bleed the United States financially. After the September 11th attacks, the U.S. military invaded Afghanistan, and bin Laden got his wish. I don't think he realized that the United States would spend 20 years there. Bin Laden was killed in 2011, May 1st, 2011. He was assassinated. He wasn't brought to justice. The real justice would have been to capture him and bring him to the Southern District of New York to stand trial, not at Guantanamo Bay. But nevertheless, bin Laden got another wish, and that was the U.S. military invasion into Iraq. Now, Iraq was worse because we killed approximately anywhere between 1 to 2 million people. The true number will never be known. And displaced millions. With Afghanistan, it might be in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. I can't give you a direct quote, and I'm not going to believe anything from the Pentagon in which they're going to downplay the numbers of civilians killed. And 20 years war, I think the Pentagon actually said that only 3,500 people were killed. 20 years? Yeah, okay, keep dreaming. And so with those two wars, bin Laden probably was, I would consider him a prophet of sorts, in which he was right about Bush being more bullheaded than Clinton. Clinton was a strategist where Bush is not. But the neocons salivated the idea because what happened? Well, we saw the ideas of the Project for the New American Century, the neocon cabinet led by Douglas Feith and Richard Pearl, Paul Wolfowitz, and the Office of Strategic Planning, as well as Israeli and Saudi interests and their foreign lobbyists, which were salivating at the idea of having their preconceived enemies destroyed. And we didn't stop there. I mean, we went into Libya, we went into Syria, we bombed Pakistan and Yemen under Obama, who basically not only did that, but he gave a blank check to the NSA, who started doing warrantless wiretapping, things that Bush only dreamed of doing, which I don't get from the left in their almost this blind zeal, like faith, this religious type of loyalty to Obama, who in some ways was exponentially worse than Bush. I think Bush was more of a mass murderer, but Obama, my goodness, it was awful. And he basically arrested more whistleblowers than any administration in history. Talk to Thomas Drake, Kirk Wiebe, William Binney, John Kiriakou. These are real whistleblowers, real men who tried to warn the U.S. of the Obama's draconian measures against American civil liberties. But I'm going off on a tangent here. I don't know what to really make of right now of Afghanistan. I'm going to wait and sit back and watch, try to make any judgments right now. I think that's the best way to look at it. Let's wait when the cameras are not shining in the Taliban's faces and see what the real powers, what are they doing behind the curtain. And I'm not talking about the Taliban. I'm not talking about Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State in Khorasan. I'm talking about the State Department. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia. I'm talking about the Gulf. I'm talking about Israel. I'm talking about real regional players who have real power at their disposal. They're the ones in control of the Pentagon, the media, the banks, and our foreign policy. And that caters to hundreds of millions of people. And I would advise you to do the same. Do not rush into judgment. Do not pick left and right. Stay independent and be aware.